Welcome to our podcast series of Coffee with a Cord, where we discuss various peace and security related topics, including ongoing and emerging conflicts in Africa, policy developments, evolving theories, and innovative approaches to peace and security. Our guests are conflict resolution practitioners, experienced mediators, and policymakers within the peace and security landscape. Enjoy this episode and feel free to leave your comments. Coffee with a Cord is published by the African Center for the Constructive Resolution of Disputes. The views and opinions expressed in this production do not reflect the views of Accord and its affiliates.
Good day and a warm welcome to Coffee with a Cord. My name is Lwandile Moyo, and in this episode we speak to Dr. Aleu Garang, head of the mission for IGAD to the Republic of South Sudan on regional roles in mediation. But before we get started, please grab a coffee, sit back, relax, and enjoy the short animated snippet that will contextualize today's conversation. See you soon. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you again, Dr. Garang, for joining us today. How's it going? How's the weather? How's everything doing on your side?
Thank you very much for hosting me. Juba is lovely. Weather is good. It's rainy season now, and lots of rains these days, with a bit of flood in some areas. But Juba, being a mountainous areas, we don't normally feel the floods.
Yeah, we've just gone into spring properly. Before we had a bit of rain, we had really cold weather, but we're happy for the weather. We're happy for the sun. Just to get right into it, I would like you to talk to us briefly about your journey to becoming a mediator. What led you down this path, and how has your earlier work as a legal practitioner influenced this?
One thing that I have noticed while I was growing up is conflict is rampant, conflict is everywhere, and I've seen at least three models of handling conflict. The usual traditional mechanism of use of force or the zero-sum approach has been adamant in all experiences I've seen, being a South Sudanese living in Sudan, where war was one of the tools for resolving conflict, with the successive governments of Sudan trying to enforce their version of law and order, avoiding addressing the political and social concerns, and even economic concerns. So that was one tool. And as somebody who was at the receiving end, one of the civilians affected by the conflict, I didn't think that war was the best way of handling conflict. Fortunately, I managed to study law, being also coming from a society where people claimed marginalization, suffered from marginalization. We needed to restore our rights, so I studied law at the Faculty de Droit, Faculty of Law in Cairo University, and in Egypt, and also the legal aspects of resolving conflict seem to have fell short in providing sustainable solutions for existing conflicts, because also in the legal process, there is always this win or lose
Definitely.
dichotomy where the other side feels sometimes aggrieved beyond losing the case. And fortunately, also, I have participated in a couple of arbitrations. And as much as arbitrations try to also make both sides feel they're all winning something, there's still this space where one party feels they're losing more than they should have lost. And based on that, I had a feeling at some point that I needed to experience something different, and mediation was that different experience that I was exposed to. Luckily enough, I came to mediation through realization of how a mediator conducts mediation. I was a negotiator myself on the South Sudan's conflict or post-conflict arrangements in preparations for South Sudan's independence. So for 4 years, I've been negotiating with my counterparts from the Republic of Sudan from 2008 till 2012. And when I got an opportunity to work on mediation in 2013, I took it as an opportunity to sharpen a bit of my acquired skills and also um, strengthen that capacity that needs to be strengthened in order to be able to deliver not only to people in my country, but people of the IGAD region, Africa, and the whole world.
Yes. Dr. Garang, please feel free to grab a cup of coffee and just sip on it as we go along. But what would you classify as a defining moment in your career?
It's a day where the special envoy for South Sudan, it's an American special envoy who asked South Sudan to consider paying something called transitional financial arrangements to Sudan, which is basically an assistant from South Sudan to Sudan. While at the time, people in Sudan were much better off. They have roads, they have schools, they have a system that has been running for the last 60 years. On the contrary, people of South Sudan had nothing in place, and they were trying to build up to meet the aspirations of the people of the Republic of South Sudan who voted for that independence. That moment, nobody was able to actually comprehend why this request was made. But it seems the mediator at the time, President Thabo Mbeki, seemed to have galvanized on that American pressure on the Republic of South Sudan and pushed for it. And and, and, and and at the time, I became curious. Why would a mediator take such stand? Later on, I came to realize that sometimes you balance things up a little bit in order for things to move, and that the Sudanese negotiators at the time felt they will collapse. The country will collapse after South Sudan moves with all the natural resources that existed. And that was the quest for them to be able to continue operating, at least at minimum, to sustain the shock of independence of South Sudan. So that was a defining moment because it was shocking in the very beginning, but later on I came to realize why it was done. Not necessarily convinced that this could be the only way, but it was necessary at the time.
So since the creation of various mediation support units within the REX, what would you say has been the most significant success and the most significant challenge?
The most significant success is we have ready capacities now that exist at various levels, especially at IGAD, at the African Union, the UN level, where we avail possibilities of adequate response, more institutionalized responses to opportunities of conflict prevention rather than just resolution. And we have ready, whether we call them technical experts or roster of mediators or a panel of the wise, we have already exposed people, trained people who come with also their own experiences in these various fields. So that's a success of its own, and that helps institutions, whether UN, African Union, IGAD, COMESA, SADC, to be able to be effective in deploying at the right time, which is a complementary to an existing early warning systems, that we are able to make use of an alert and be able to make the difference in de-escalating conflict or stopping conflict. However, the other challenge also came related to the early warning, because often the warning is provided and the intervention is at the level of countries which are sovereign, and they are very difficult opportunities where intergovernmental entities like REX, or African Union, or UN could be able to push beyond the normal diplomatic channels for conflict to be averted. Because there is this either denial at the government side, at the leadership side, or sometimes acknowledgement of the situation, but they would prefer a different approach rather than the robots interventions or support that may come from outside.
Yeah, so how do we ensure African ownership of peacemaking and conflict initiatives? And to what extent are the MSUs of the REX responsible for delivering this?
I think for ownership to take place, we need to start to put money where our mouth is. If we talk of African solutions for African problems, then Africans need to start owning by funding their own initiatives. It's not wrong to have support from outside, Europe or America or China for that matter, but it should be as a support rather than the initial interventions. The second thing is that the MSUs themselves need to be institutionalized into these institutions, paid for by member states. The funds that these MSUs depend on needs to be funded by member states. We need to also use indigenous knowledge, because it's good to have theories around, but not every single theory that works in a certain social, economic, cultural context could be imported to African problems. It won't deliver. We have wonderful models in Africa where conflict is resolved, and it's not any different if that same conflict took place between states or between political giants. We have a model in South Sudan where we have seen a long war of 10 years between Dr. John Garang, the then SPLM leader, and his rival, his deputy, Dr. Machar, was concluded in 1999 in what was known as Woundliat Conflict Resolution Conference. It's just a tree where elders sat down and both PhD holders from the West had to come and adhere to existing African norms to resolve conflict. And they ended their own animosities and differences at that moment.
So I'm sure you've faced many challenges along your journey to becoming an esteemed mediator and leader. To anyone else thinking of following in your footsteps, I mean, especially Sudanese and South Sudanese youth who find themselves in the middle of their respective political transitions, what would be your advice or few words of wisdom?
I believe working now with youth and women groups, working on young women mediators and young youth mediators in general, both females and males. Um, uh, there have been a lot of enthusiasm of recent, and I commend that zeal, because this space is not left for people who are gray haired, well educated, or whatever. It's a field for everybody. Conflict is existing everywhere. And we all need to do our bits to try to resolve issues using other tools rather than war, conflict resolution mechanisms, or the other tools that exist. So, what I would encourage the youth is to try to examine mediation where um, you could resolve a conflict by allowing the parties to take ownership, allowing the parties to be the one on the driving seat and find solutions that they themselves will respect, solutions they themselves are going to own and honor. Because often, if you go through other mechanisms, it will be only the conditions. The moment conditions change, um, we will come back to
Yes.
the reality. We've
Yeah.
seen it in Afghanistan. We've seen it in conflict where one party overpowers the other, and the moment conditions change and power comes back to this side, or they became neutral, we are back to conflict again. So mediation is an art of allowing ownership by the parties, not the mediators, the negotiating parties, and hopefully with the wider stakeholders.
Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have today. Thank you, Dr. Garang, for making yourself available to talk to us in what has been an invigorating conversation.
Thank you
Most
very much.
importantly, thank you, the audience, for watching this episode of Coffee with a Cord. Until next time, I have been your host, Lwandile Moyo. Goodbye.
Thank you for watching today's episode of Coffee with a Cord. Do not forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you can receive notifications every time we post a new episode. For more updates, like our Facebook page, African Center for the Constructive Resolution of Disputes, or follow us on Twitter or on Instagram at Accord Online. To learn more about Accord, visit our website www.accord.org.za.